My name's Sally Forsyth. I'm the Marketing Manager here at Mesmer, and this video will introduce you to the self-assessment and improvement planning tools on the Mesmer software platform. The demonstration itself followed the Self-Assessing Brilliantly webinar hosted by Louise Doyle in January in partnership with our colleagues over at the Strategic Development Network. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Please take note of the offer at the end, and if you have any questions, please come straight through to me or any member of the Mesmer team. Thanks very much.
Mesmer as a software platform covers a range of different things within the quality cycle, self-assessment reports, deep dives, improvement plans, observations and reflective practice. You have a quality calendar in there, there's an evidence library in there to help you to manage and have all your evidence in one central location. It will help you to set and monitor key performance indicators, and it will provide you with the ability to be able to produce reports and insights. And as mentioned, it's about being able to provide you with easier ways to identify improvements. It's about getting colleagues involved in the process, and it's also about helping you to ultimately, I mean, this is one of the added advantages, it's not the only goal, but maintain or improve your outcomes at inspection by giving you confidence in those processes as well. So that's what we are all about. It's a cloud-based software platform, and it's broken down into products, and there are some features around those products as well. And probably the thing to bear in mind at this moment in time is that there are parts of the system that are kind of central to Mesmer, so things like having a quality calendar, being able to set your key performance indicators, having a central library to store and manage your evidence, and having an improvement planning facility within the system and managing those improvement plans is a core part of Mesmer. And then you have two key products which are developed, so that's for observation, teaching, learning, and reflective practice. And then you have evaluate, which is about self-assessments. That's self-assessment, building a self-assessment report and doing deep dives. So it's that evaluative part of quality assurance and the quality cycle. And Mesmer is very much focused on giving you a space where you can co-investigate, co-reflect and co-improve to make that difference through continual improvement. So as I've mentioned, we did a webinar earlier in the week. My colleague Louise Doyle, our CEO, presented that. We did it in partnership with our friends over at the Strategic Development Network. And I will share that with you. But what we looked at during that webinar was some of the key problems to avoid in self-assessment. And we asked the people through a poll on the session, we asked the people that attended that and there was around about 200 people on it, just over 200 people. We asked them to identify where their problems were within quality assurance and quality improvement during that session. And I've put the responses to that on the end of the rows there, so you can see that at the top of the pile, 33% of people down here said that improvement planning was a bit of an operational to-do list for them. And then next up we had the SAR is higher narrative, low on evaluation. Then we had leadership team doesn't own the process or the outcome at 15%. Followed by 7% purpose of self-assessment is misunderstood. 6% we had too much so what in there. Jointly with quick monitoring based on the action implemented, not impact. So has it been done as opposed to what difference did it make, which is something that we can look at. And then we had 2% for problems to solve are written in the future tense in the SAR, and disjoint between the self-assessment and the quality improvement plan at 2%. So what I'll do is I've kind of put those percentages next to them. You may identify some of them, you may identify all of them as on the screen all at once. But what I'll do is I'll look at those problems in comparison to how Mesmer can support you. So I'll use those as a checklist in terms of what Mesmer can do. So if you can identify with any of those, then hopefully this session will help you to see how using Mesmer as a software platform can overcome some of those for you. So if I just switch over to Mesmer then, so we can have a look. Find the right screen. So I'm in the Mesmer software platform now. I'm actually on one of the self-assessment reports. So this is one that we've been working on at the very top of the screen, you have some operations in here. So being able to moderate and approve the SAR is built into the process as part of the system. We'll not touch on that too much today, but just to be aware that that's there. And then moving down the screen, you can see that we've got a space where you can, from within the SAR, start to pull out your improvement activity from within here. You've got the ability to move information around and copy it to different places. And then there's a space here where you can think about linking evidence, but I can show you a little bit of that while we're on here as well. So one of the things that we touched on in those problem statements was the ability to be able to get people involved in the process. So I can very quickly cover that as we're going through here. So you can see I've got some buttons in here to invite and remove and add in users. So as a manager within an organisation, I can include those people within my team by being the owner of this self-assessment report and by inviting people to participate with me as I see fit. So it's not down to a single administrator sat centrally somewhere to decide who can be involved in the process. If you want to use it that way, you can give your owners of your self-assessment reports, your leaders and your managers responsible for it, the ability to include people as they see fit. So there's a bit of sense of ownership then with those people in terms of I own my SAR and I've got the ability to be able to include people in it as we go. And then you can see we've got some other functions in here around being able to submit it for this moderation process, browsing inquiries, so linking it into the deep dive part of Mesmer, we'll touch on that in a minute, and then scope of provision. So this is an important part, so being able to put that headline information at the top of the self-assessment report that gives you your that introduction and that summary that you add into the top, that's built in here, so there's a space for that. And then ultimately being able to, at the other side of the process, export and download into PDF or Word or Excel or whichever format you see fit, which you can then use in meetings, send off to Ofsted, at the end of that process. Now, for those of you who were on the webinar on Monday, Louise touched on key performance indicators and using those in addition to or in advance of using the education inspection framework to drive your evaluation. So having the ability within the system to be able to set your key performance indicators centrally and link those and push those out to different parts of self-assessment or improvement planning or deep dives is a key function within the system, because what that enables you to do is to set what those are and attach them to the relevant department. So I've put my key performance indicators very quickly, it doesn't take a minute just to put them into here, set those out in terms of the objectives, link them down to those key performance areas, and then just attach them by connecting them. I can attach them to the relevant team or department just by clicking on connect and then attaching them to a relevant team or department. And there's just one in this one, but I would add them in as I see fit. And what that will mean is by setting those out in here and by putting them into here, I can link them into my SAR so that when my colleagues go into here to complete their SAR, they can track their progress against that key result area up at the top here, so they can just do an update from within here. Oops, I pressed the button too fast. So you can see here I've got the ability to be able to capture summary judgment and give an update on the progress that we're making towards that in terms of achieving that particular result. So that's built into the system. It's not something that you can easily do using manual processes. It's already contained within the platform. Moving down, so in this particular example, we have a grade profile set to the Ofsted Education Inspection Framework. So this is a template. So we have a number of templates in the background. This one's set to the Education Inspection Framework, and we've got an overall grade in here as being partly met in this one, but it can be changed. So you just click on there and say, this is where we think we are in terms of our current grade. And the indicator in here is set against the requirement for good in the IFE. So it can be adapted to suit your organisation. It's not entirely driven by that across the piece, but in this example it's set to the overall grade to being partly met against the education inspection framework for good. So it's using good as the starting point and saying we are not quite good yet in this scenario, but you can change that obviously to being met, and then you would be saying we are at the level of good. You can use 1 to 4, you can use the traditional Ofsted grades if that's what you choose to do, but it's not just about Ofsted. So MESMA can be used in lots of different ways for different quality standards, but we're just giving you the example of the IFIN here. Now, one of the interesting things that Louise said on the session on Monday was don't start at the top of the SAR, of the Education Inspection Framework, and work your way down the SAR. She's actually given us a blog that we can use that we'll share with you after the session today in terms of how to break this down and take it in a different way. So starting maybe with leadership and management, because I can move through the various sections within the SAR itself, I can go directly to the place that I want to start and just start working from there. It's not a start at 3 eyes and work your way down the education inspection framework. I can start here because it perhaps just makes more sense. So I'll share those tips with you around self-assessment report writing at the end of the session, and you'd be able to in this case start here, start with how are leaders and managers setting out the vision for the curriculum, and then going back up to intent, and writing the, not having to follow that flow, but writing it just as you think is the most natural way for you to write it, based on what makes more logical sense. And the fact that you can work your way up and down MESMA and go for those questions, it doesn't have to be start at the top, work your way down. You're going to get exhausted doing that. Just start in the logical flow of what makes sense, and it gives you the ability to do that. And as your colleagues are working their way through the self-assessment report, you're able to track their progress. So you can see this bar will start to move and it will track where they're up to and show you that how much progress each of those departments and teams are making towards completing the self-assessment report. And then within each one of them, you'll be able to see a grade breakdown for that section. So against each question, we are asking in this example for people to give a grade indicator against each area of each question within the IFE, and then you're building up a picture based on that grade breakdown, and that actually is available to you then also in a dashboard, so you can see and we'll have a look at that. You can see in MESMA, what's our grade profile, how have we tagged it to key themes, being able to draw out some of those additional key themes within their evaluation, within their analysis, and you can use those to inform your decision making and to really sort of build up a picture of what's happening across the piece. So one of the things that we touched on during those problems to avoid was this idea about being, I'm just going back to my slide there, the idea about too much narrative, low on evaluation, a little bit too much so what, some of the writing challenges that people have when writing the self-assessment report. And one of the ways in which MESMA does that is just in the structure. It helps you to do that by just being in the structure. So being very clear and saying we're not going to let you just have a massive amount of space to just write a descriptive piece, although we do give you the ability to be able to add in what we do, because sometimes that's helpful in terms of writing the SAR, but being able to very succinctly capture what we do well and areas for improvement. And in introducing the system to your colleagues, being clear, those areas for improvement are for you to identify the things that you want to improve, not to start writing your quip within your SAR. So these are areas for improvement, and the system actually encourages that, and I'll show you that in a moment. But really capturing what we do well, really capturing those areas for improvement, being able to, as you're going through that, then you'll see if I move my mouse over to the right hand side, you can see in this example, I can move these around actually just to make it easier for me to navigate as well, so I could change the order of them if I wanted to do that. But you can see here, I've got a column at the end here, which is my evidence. So where it's relevant, I can attach a little bit of evidence against that question. So these are my areas of improvement. This is the grade I want to give it. This is a tag, I'm going to link it to a theme. I could link it to a URL, so that might be an online report, but I can also attach a piece of evidence to that as well. So that's bringing your SAR to life. It's being able to attach it very clearly to the evidence, which is very difficult to do on a Word document or on a spreadsheet, particularly if that central piece of evidence changes. And because MESMA has a central storage location for your evidence documents, where you can organise those and keep the most up-to-date place for them, and you can actually attach them out to the self-assessment report, that means that that's going to be up to date, because you're keeping that up to date centrally, and it's a central storage location and everything's neatly organised. And one of the bits of feedback that we get when we're talking to users of the self-assessment report is it's just having that confidence of knowing that if I need to produce something very quickly for SMT, if we get the call from Ofsted, that because we've got this evidence bank and it's keeping all of that neat and tidy, I can go to my SAR, I get asked a question about a particular thing, and I know the evidence is there. So it's just, how does it help you to keep things organised so that you've got that confidence that you know where you can go if you need to at any particular point in time. So hopefully I've been able to demonstrate there, as we've been going through, just how MESMA helps you to keep that narrative down. The other thing it helps you to do in terms of being able to respond to the questions within the education inspection framework. So you can see, because we've built this around that structure, we've got the question in here on the left hand side. What is Ofsted asking you to say in this particular case? But it could be, like I say, any standard. I can click on help and guidance in here, and I've got the requirements for good. So I can see the detail behind the question. I can think about the factors that you might want to consider, and I can have a link to the Education Inspection Handbook if I want to look at different criteria around that, or get into the background of it. So for people that aren't used to the IFE, that's really helpful, because you've got that help and guidance on hand. Now, we've also got variations on the template sitting in the background to here, so that if you wanted to, you could have the ESFA accountability standards built in as well. So you could have a second tab in your help and guidance that would have that criteria added in. You could also have other criteria added in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Ofsted Education Inspection Framework and that's it. It can be mapped across. So actually the potential for MESMA to support you to go beyond the Education Inspection Framework, think about your own KPIs and your own objectives, but also include help and guidance from other organisations is there if that's what you want to do with it. So in its simplest form, it's providing you with a structure for self-assessment, but you can take it a bit further and you can bring in other quality standards and quality frameworks within there as well. So hopefully that's helped. I'm going to take a bit of a pause there. I don't know whether that chat's working. I'm just going to say hi and see if anyone's out there. But if you have any questions and you can see my message, then let me know. I don't know, Evan, if that's working. Can you see my chat, Evan, if I just take a little pause there?
No, the question and answers box is available, but the webinar chat is not.
Okay, no problem. So if you've got any questions, and please feel free to pop a question in the box there. I'm not sure why that's not working, but yeah, please feel free to use the Q&A box if you want to. So just going back to the list of things I wanted to work through with you guys today. In particular, we were going to talk about the improvement plan. So thinking about moving through into the improvement plan from identifying those areas for improvement on the SAR. So let me just switch back into my screen, and I'm going to go back up to the top of the screen there, and I'm going to use this evidence button. Before I do that, just to give you a bit of context, you can see that this is where I'm working at the moment in Evaluate, but Improve is now the section of MESMA that I'm going to go into. So this is where your improvement plans are stored. So if I go into here, you can see that I've got a selection of improvement plans on my screen set up for the various teams and departments depending upon the structure of my organisation, and it literally just takes you a second to import and create a new improvement plan, which again is owned by the person that takes responsibility for that. So if I click into this one, you can see that I've got a quip in here. We've just got one activity in at the moment. Again, we've got our objectives and key results linked to it. I can see we've got some red lines here, so we're not doing particularly well against the progress of objectives and tasks, and we've also added in some impact in there. So I've got one at the moment, so in the quip. But if I go, we're showing you how to make that link between what's happening in self-assessment and what's happening back on the quality improvement plan. So I'm going to go back into the SAR and go back into that SAR that I was working on just in here. You can see here I've got an area for improvement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my evidence. I'm going to use my evidence. I'm not going to use my evidence. Let me just go back again. So I'm just going to use my create improvement. Press the button too fast. And I'm just going to put in here a test objective. Let me just put test in there. And I'm going to attach that to my organisational quality improvement plan. So I'm going to click that. And then because my particular objective could address more than one area for improvement, because we know that that happens, I can select which one I'm going to link it to. So actually what I'm doing is I'm making that direct link between the areas for improvement as I've written them up in my self-assessment report, which is why we use this separate tab. So saying these are the areas for improvement, this is the objective that's going to address that, this is the plan I'm going to put it onto, and I'm going to create my objective in there. Now when I go back into my improvement plan, what's going to happen is you're going to see I've got today's test one, actually there's one I did the other day, today's test one in there, and it's got that link to the side. If I press that little button there that's got, looks like a chain, it's shown that link to the self-assessment report that I've just created there. And then I can start to put some meat on the bones in terms of what impact do we expect this to have, allocating it out to my colleagues, they will be notified that that's happened. So we're going to then start to bring colleagues into the quality improvement plan from here. So being able to say on this particular one here, if I just edit this one, I can see it's got me on there. I'm going to add Carol into it. Carol's going to get a notification now, so I won't do that, that she's been added to this improvement activity. I'm starting to say this is my expected impact, so I'm being very clear on expected impact. And when we've got to that point where we've completed that, I'm going to say what our actual impact was, and I can record some impact notes. So there's spaces and features in the system that are really geared towards making you capture your impact on the QIP. And it's going to help you to track how much progress you're making towards impact. So and it does that by these impact notes. But what Mesmer also does, if I just go back onto the home screen for improve, so back into my main menu onto the improvement where we can see all the different improvement plans, the facility in the system for you to be able to capture a summary judgment. So I'm just going to go over to this box on the right hand side that says summary there. I'm going to click on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to take a snapshot of today. So this is where I am in terms of my objectives, my tasks, and my impact. This is any changes that we've made. You can see I've been doing some demos, so I've got some different ones where I've done title and test in there. But what I can also do is I can see my historical summaries. So before today, I've added in information. I've captured those summaries, and I've captured them at these different points in time. So I'm able to go back and view those, and I can also export them. So I could look across a range of teams and departments and see their progress against those different areas. So it's helping me to track progress in multiple locations at the same time as drilling down into those individual summary reviews for each of the different departments within here as well. And I can actually use the quality calendar to schedule those. So I'm going to go back into my main menu and go to quality calendar. And you can see if I do that and do my month view, you can see I can say, can you do me an improvement summary within here? And I add that in as a task for my colleague to be able to do that. And what that'll mean for them is they go in, they press that button on summary, that will capture a snapshot of where they're up to in terms of their current progress, and they can write a little bit of narrative around their progress against the overall plan, if that's what you choose to do. So it's really, like I say, saving you time, taking away some of that administration around managing the self-assessment report and in quality improvement plans, and giving you that structure for you and your colleagues to work towards. So I'm just conscious of time. I'm just going to go back onto my slide and just double check that I think I've covered most of the things on the slide today in terms of those problems to avoid in self-assessment and how Mesmer can help you to do that. I'll just mention one of the ways in which you can really understand if your quality improvement plan has met your original intended objectives, so you had the impact that you wanted it to have, through deep dives. And what Mesmer can do is it can give you the ability to set up deep dives in the system using a range of different templates. So you can see down the left-hand side there, I've given you the key themes. Now, what we're doing for February is we are going to include all 13 of those deep dive templates in the subscription to Evaluate, so the self-assessment report. So you'd get self-assessment report, including your quality framework, the education inspection framework, and then you would get the deep dive as part of that anyway. That's part of the subscription for Evaluate, but you'd also get those 13 deep dive templates for you to be able to do that follow-up, understanding the impact of those quality improvement measures. And it also helps you to identify those areas for improvement as well.